The movie opens in an old boat that hasn't cruised in a long time. A man in his late 20s pulls up his wetsuit and dives into the water to scrape algae off of the boat. Then he spots an old football with the name Shane Falco and looks at it with nostalgia. This is Shane Falco, a former All-American quarterback for Ohio. He passes the ball and celebrates as he did during his playing days. Now cut to a professional football game played in Washington, D.C. During the last minutes of the game, the commentators discuss how this might be the last game of the season, considering how the players went on a strike after the owners refused to meet their salary demands. We see Eddie Martell, the quarterback of the Washington Sentinels, being interviewed about the contract negotiations regarding their current salary. He tells the interviewer that a salary of $5 million a year is not enough for paying his agency, child support, and his lawyer. During the same time, Edward O'Neill, the owner of the Washington Sentinels, walks around in an empty stadium with former head coach Jimmy McGinty. Edward asks Jimmy to return to the team as the coach for the remaining 4 games of the season. Jimmy doesn't believe that they can win 3 games back-to-back to proceed to the playoffs with replacement players. To which Edward dismisses him and replies, "You won for him once, and he can do it again." He then proposes building a team of nobodies who will play to win instead of getting rich. Jimmy thinks about it for a while and tosses a coin to make his decision. Finally, he agrees to build a team under the condition that he will recruit anybody he wants with no interference, and the two are able to come to an agreement. Afterward, Jimmy assembles a group of eclectic players from all walks of life, which confuses the other staff of the fledgling team. The first recruit is Daniel Bateman, a hardcore SWAT team officer known for losing a kidney during the Gulf War. He was a walk-on for Michigan State for a year before returning to duty. Next, we have Clifford Franklin, a thief with an incredible talent for sprinting but a weakness for catching. Next, the Jackson brothers, Andre and Jamal. Excellent offensive guards until Andre got traded and they fell apart. Now they just work as bodyguards. Another recruit is Nigel Gruff, a striker from Cardiff, turned gambling addict and pub owner. He was given the name The Leg because he can kick a soccer ball across the length of the field. Lastly, Jimmy introduces Shane Footsteps Falco, a former quarterback from Ohio. Here the other coaches are hesitant to let Shane join because he hasn't played in years. Jimmy visits a surprised Shane and asks if he knows who he is. Shane replies that he remembers him as Jimmy McGinty, an old coach from the 80s. Then Jimmy reminds him of when they first met in the Sugar Bowl, the infamous game that Shane lost by 45 points. He gets frustrated and asks Jimmy his true intentions for visiting him, to which Jimmy replies that he wants Shane to play as the quarterback for the Sentinels, and tries to persuade him the promise of a great team. Shane declines by telling him that he's retired, but Jimmy is not discouraged by this. Sensing Shane's crushed spirits, he gives him a piece of advice on how to be a winner, but even this is disregarded by Shane, claiming that he does not want to be remembered at all. Since all of his previous attempts have failed, Jimmy urges him to be a part of something greater than himself. In the following days, the striking players are seen protesting against the replacement players. They greet the players with hostility while calling them scabs and throwing eggs at them. Now safely inside the stadium, Coach Pilikowski talks to a big tight end player named Brian Murphy and praises him for his catching skills. He learns that Murphy was born deaf, which is why he's not able to excel as a first-round pick. Jimmy then introduces Nigel to Pilikowski, who is confused and disappointed because of his weak, wiry build. We meet Ray Smith, a convicted felon, known for assaulting a police officer. He was once a star cornerback and kick returner. During the training, Pilikowski is rattled because of his unconventional replacement players and the short time they have for preparing for the next game. Seeing a huge man enter the field, this is Jumbo Fumiko, a sumo wrestler from Japan, who is an offensive powerhouse and an expert at pushing people around. Unbeknownst to everyone, Shane is already outside the stadium waiting to come in. As he walks to the stadium, he's assaulted by the striking players. They insult him by destroying his car and calling him a never was. Amidst all of this, Shane composes himself and walks into the stadium. The players finally meet Shane as he gracefully runs onto the field. He shows the team that he still has the skills to become a great quarterback, and everyone is impressed by his throwing capabilities. Franklin, the thief who is notoriously bad at catching, tries to catch the ball but runs into another player and knocks himself out. They play a game of football and the players introduce themselves to each other. Danny forcefully tackles Shane but greets him like a friend. His aggressive demeanor is one of his distinct traits, making him an effective linebacker. Nigel approaches Shane, telling him he lost a ton of money because of his Sugar Bowl performance, which leaves him puzzled. While training, Shane sneaks some glances at Annabelle Farrell, the head cheerleader who is in charge of finding a cheer for the Sentinels. The rest of the practice progresses successfully, and now the players are eating together in a cafeteria, gaining their strength back. It's a fun and productive time while the players chatter and goof around as they eat. Back on the field, Annabelle speaks with 2 club dancers, Heather and Dawn, and hires them as cheerleaders. After the practice, Shane and Annabelle meet in the parking lot, and she offers him a ride home, which he accepts. But on the way home, he realizes Annabelle is like a madman who drives dangerously, like she's being chased by the cops. Shane invites Annabelle to come on board the boat, but she declines and tells him she doesn't date football players, especially quarterbacks. Later that night, Shane is all alone and nervous on the field. He's spotted by Jimmy, who reassures him that he will do fine. The next day, the fans and commentators are bewildered that the Sentinels have recruited a bunch of unknowns. Everyone is extremely tense as they do their pre-game rituals and prepare for their first professional game against Detroit. The game starts, and as Bateman is introduced, he runs into a wire across the ground and bounces like a cannonball, taking out the cheerleaders on the side. Luckily, he emerges without a scratch, and the rest of the team is introduced. As the Sentinels form their first huddle, 2 of the players break out into a fight, and Falco gets hit by his own teammate before they can even start the game. The first half of the game progresses disastrously, even getting another penalty from Bateman as he tackles the other team. Detroit scores a touchdown while some of the Sentinels get sick. They pick up the pace for the rest of the game and manage to score a field goal and touchdown. During the final minutes of the game, Shane changes the play at the last second, but the Sentinels are still unable to score. The game ends and the Sentinels lose by 4 points. Later that night, they drink and mope around the bar. Unexpectedly, they encounter striking players in the bar. They harass Murphy for being deaf, which results in a fight. Soon after, the Sentinels are in jail, but this becomes a fun time for them as they bond and joke around. After their impromptu karaoke session, Jimmy arrives and reprimands them, but wishes he could have seen Martell get his butt kicked. The following day, Annabelle visits Shane at the dock. They share an intimate moment as she sees him bruised and applies an ointment to the bruise. Then she tells him that he's the first player she's ever seen care more about his teammates than himself. Shane later arrives at the stadium, and once again he's assaulted by Martell and the other players. His car gets destroyed, but this time the replacement players retaliate and shoot Martell's windshield. In the last game, they lost because they lacked leadership and brotherhood. To solve this, they talk about their fears on the field. Shane reveals he's terrified of quicksand, which are dangerous and hard to escape. Jimmy tells them that they can all overcome their fears together to win their next game. That next Sunday, the game is against San Diego, and it's not going well. Shane has already taken 3 vicious hits, and they're down by many points. But he's still determined to change the game and passes the ball to Fumiko, and makes a successful play, earning them a touchdown. As the cheerleaders dance in a sultry way, the crowd goes wild and distracts Detroit. The Sentinels successfully intercept the ball and land another touchdown. For the next play, Bateman gets the ball and evades everyone on the field, but uses up the clock, so Shane tackles him to get a timeout. Nigel decides to do a field goal from 65 yards away and shocks everyone by making the kick, which earns the Washington Sentinels their first win. Later that night in Annabelle's pub, the fans love the new replacement team. Shane visits and they talk about the game and how Annabelle took over the pub after her father died. After an awkward moment, Shane decides to ask her out, which she agrees to. He makes a move and they share a passionate kiss. Fast forward to the next game, Shane scores an easy touchdown against Phoenix, but their streak ends here as Franklin's unable to catch the ball and loses the round. Jimmy gives him some stickum for his grip, which helps him to get a touchdown for the team. After a couple of lucky passes and touchdowns, the team nearly loses the game against Phoenix. The game ends and a reporter interviews them about their next game in Dallas. Then we see Jimmy and O'Neal talking about the team's future. O'Neal tells Jimmy that Martell will be allowed to play again, but Jimmy refuses and insists that Shane should play. Jimmy walks out disappointedly and insults the owner for abandoning his new team. The next day, Jimmy approaches Shane on the field while he's practicing. He tells him that Martell will play in the next game, leaving a disappointed Shane behind. Shane agrees and says it's better for the team if he doesn't play. In the locker room, Martell insults him by saying he doesn't deserve Annabelle because he'll just drag her down with him. An annoyed yet calm Shane leaves Martell behind and wishes for the new quarterback to take care of his team. The team and the cheerleaders go to a club and drink the night away. Shane tells them that he's not going to play at Dallas, and everyone raises a glass to him for being a great quarterback and friend. Later, Annabelle is stood up for her date with Shane. Now on game day, Martell leads Washington against Dallas. The fans are angered by this and want to see Shane play instead of Martell. The game is not going well and Dallas scores the first touchdown. After a few incomplete passes and failed plays, a fight breaks out between Murphy and Martell. The rest of the team is troubled by this, which makes them play even worse. On the bleachers, Nigel spots the gangsters to who he owes money and walks away. Before the first half ends, Martell throws the ball over the bleachers and angers an already frustrated Jimmy. A reporter asks Jimmy what they need in order to win the game, to which he replies they need heart to get back on track. While Jimmy and Martell argue in the locker room, Shane shows up and everyone is surprised. They dismiss Martell's insults and gang up on him. Now everyone is cheering for Shane's arrival. He first approaches Annabelle and kisses her as an apology. The reinvigorated Sentinels earn their first touchdown, but Cochran injures his knee in the process. As they gain more yards, the Sentinels are now close to victory. They play like there's no tomorrow, and once again they get a touchdown. With 28 seconds remaining, Washington needs a decent return to get a fair shot at making the game. A disgruntled Nigel looks over at the bleachers, still threatened by the three gangsters, as he makes his way to the field. Shane decides to do a fake and runs all the way to the end zone to score. However, the ref calls for a 10-yard penalty, so they have to repeat the first down. Now they're in their last play. Shane throws a game-winning pass to Murphy, who successfully catches it and makes a touchdown. The Sentinels win the last game with a score of 20 against 17, and they earn a spot in the playoffs. As the players celebrate, Jimmy narrates how they only had the gratification and personal glory of an athlete's dream of a second chance, as the substitute players dance on the field to the song "I Will Survive." Let us know what you think about it in the comments below, and thanks for watching. Be sure to follow and subscribe for more movie recaps 3 times a week. Until next time, dear viewer.